Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of Creator Spotlight Season 3 from The Interface. Creator Spotlight is our series where we talk to creators about what they make and do and how they got started. Today I'm joined by Lexie Cooper, otherwise known as Track It Pacer online. How are you doing?
I'm great, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. We just had 15 minutes of toing and froing with technical issues.
I was going to say, you've been the most patient person that I've ever done a recording with, because like, how many times did I cancel on you?
I think 2 or 3.
Before we did this? Yeah, and then of course I get on and we have like 15 minutes of troubleshooting, like you said, but we figured it out in the end.
Yeah, it's all right. Not a problem.
Thank God. Yeah. So, yeah, it's great to finally be here and chat with you. Thanks
Fantastic.
for having me on.
Thank you so much for giving up your time to record with me. I know you're a little bit ill as well, so it's not a problem at all. So just for some context, just going to give a brief overview about who you are and then what you make and do as well. So
yeah, I'm actually, I've never had to do this before. I don't think, like, sum up myself in this way, but like so I'm a network engineer. I'll start with that. I have a CCNA that beautifully expired a couple months ago, actually. I wasn't always a network engineer. I had a career before this, so I'm still like, I don't know, I've been doing it for about 5 years now. In my current role, my title is actually avionics integration engineer. I work for an aerospace company called Blue Origin. For people who are not familiar, we are building a heavy lift rocket called New Glenn. And so that's the network that I work on right now, which is super weird. And a lot of my knowledge right now in networking is like very niche and strange. And I also can't talk about a lot of it, so it's wonderful.
Yep.
But other than that, I make videos on TikTok. And I just generally am a menace on Twitter as well, about a lot of the time tech topics, but not always.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I used to be a network engineer as well. So,
oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to work for a wireless ISP. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wireless.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've been dabbling in that just a little bit, and it's like still very nebulous to me. Wireless is like RF technologies and stuff are not my forte, so it's been interesting to learn about, but
yeah,
also kind of difficult.
It is incredible how it works. That's where I got my start.
Like magic.
So it's amazing how it all works, and just how short amount of time it's been around and how far it's come.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing what they can do now with wireless technologies. Yeah. People joke a lot that like there's, Wi-Fi on the rocket or whatever, right? That I'm working on. We're not using Wi-Fi. I can at least say that. But like we do have RF, right? Because there's radios on any given, spacecraft, and so it's still RF, right? Like it's a similar. It's the same technology, really. So it's still kind of magical to me, and I don't work with that stuff at all, but I find it very fascinating.
Yeah, it's good. Generally, what led you to networking in general? So for me, it was my first job, and it was an apprenticeship I did, which was an amazing opportunity to do. So what about you? What sort of led you down that path of dabbling into networking?
Man, apprenticeship, just as a quick note, apprenticeship is the cool, like I wish I had that opportunity myself. Not that I'm like, I think I would have been better off, but I'm pretty happy with where I am. But I think apprenticeship is an awesome thing to do. I wish it were more common. Maybe it's just America where it's not. I'm not really sure, but like,
not really sure. It's very commonplace here. It used to be a what do you call it? Like a sticking point or like a look down on type of thing ages ago. But it's very really? Much a lot of people get into it, and it's a good way of getting a start in a career. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wish I had the opportunity to do that, because I think it sounds like a fantastic way to get into a career like this, which is a fantastic career. So. But yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question you asked originally?
That's right. Like what made you go down the journey of becoming a network engineer, basically?
Right. So I had another career before this, and I won't get into like all the details, but I have, my only higher education degree is a bachelor's in English literature, which is obviously not like directly applicable to network engineering. I didn't actually know that network engineering was a thing for like most of my 20s. And then when I was like nearing 30, I was just so unhappy with the career I was in. And I actually, I tell this story on the Art of Network Engineering podcast too. I like to tell this story because it's the only time I've ever done anything poignant in my life where I set this calendar reminder on my phone. Like I was so miserable. I was like, I have to do something, but like I need to give it one more shot. So I set this calendar reminder on my phone for I think like 3 months later. And it was like, are you still miserable? ? was like all it was. And my deal with myself that I made when I made that reminder was, if I'm still miserable in 3 months, I have to quit my job. I have to leave this town that I'm in, and I have to go move back with my parents and figure out my next career move, because this isn't working. So that time came and went, and I was still miserable. So I did that. I quit my job, and I decided, like, okay, I'm going to just like move back in with my parents. I was very lucky that they were willing to let me do that. And then I'm going to just like explore what career options are out there. There is a nice community college nearby. And so I started taking courses there. And I originally was interested in tech because I was like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff out there for like women getting into programming. Like there was a lot of that being pushed at the time, which is great, I think. So I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll look into programming. So I did like introductory classes at this community college, and then took this course called Introduction to Networks. I had no idea what that was. And then like I find out what an IP address is, and my mind is just completely blown. I'm not kidding. Like that, I remember the moment where like my instructor was like, yeah, so let's talk about IP addresses. And we talked about it, and I was just like the whole time. So once I learned what an IP address was, I was like, I want to do this. This is so cool. And that's it. So since then, I've gotten my CCNA. I started working in a NOC at like an ISP cloud provider-esque place.
Yep.
And now somehow, for some godforsaken reason, they want me at Blue Origin. Thank God. So so that's where I am now.
Yeah, that's what I used to do at the Wispy. So I used to be in the NOC, so that's what
Oh, cool.
I did as well. So.
The NOC is such a great learning place. Like I will forever be grateful for my time there. I got to touch so many different pieces of hardware. You know, I learned so much different, like it was a multi-vendor environment very heavily. And it was also a little chaotic, like network infrastructure wise. Yeah, like you it's like this, you know, there's thousands and thousands of network devices on there. And so, you know, you have like somebody designed this one little section of it, and then someone else designed this other section of it, and one of those people was like studying for their CCIE, so it's very obvious like what they did there. But then this other person was like, no, Juniper, and like did something else with it. And so I got to learn like all these different perspectives, like network architecture. Very, very interesting. So the NOC is an awesome place to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's interesting. Were they primarily fiber, or was it older stuff than that?
I think they were primarily fiber, but you know what? There's a lot of old stuff too. Like they had some stuff still on like bread racks and like a DC that was like, you know, stitched together with like, I don't know, duct tape and prayers. But there was like copper Ethernet stuff that we were working on as well. But then, you know, I got some DWDM experience. It was a lot of like junior level stuff, of course, but like a very broad education there, and it really made me a better network engineer.
That's fantastic, yeah. The thing I'm interested in, because like when you look at network engineering, there could be all kinds of things. Like you could go for ISP stuff, you could go for like audio visual stuff. So when they record massive TV shows, it's surprising how much networking is in that because of how much bandwidth you need for it. When I learned about that you do stuff for rockets, like I know you can't really talk about much of it, but what, like the first question I had, what kind of is it communication for the for the rockets to get back to, for communication to monitor it and that sort of thing, and then what even what even is it? Broadly speaking, because like you said, I can't, unfortunately there's like NDA ITAR stuff going on, so I can't speak very specifically on it, but yeah, I mean, like any spacefaring vehicle, you're going to need to have communications to ground, obviously, in order to monitor it, depending on what like that vehicle's purpose and mission is, you know. And then of course, within the vehicle is incredibly important as well. So my role specific, so we have all of that going on. My role specifically is just on the vehicle, because ground comms and RF is like a whole other like enchilada, right? So I am specifically an integration engineer for the networking, like devices, avionics on the rocket itself. So I help, basically my network allows the individual computers and electronic things on this rocket to work together and talk. It's a very, very low latency environment.
And so, my network has to do a lot of things to enable that and allow the rocket and all those avionics to work together as one thing, the rocket, not like individual systems, right? So, yeah, it's very different than a terrestrial network. I love saying that, terrestrial network, but it really, it's very different. There's a lot of similarities to how you would, consider, I don't know, considerations you have to make when you're designing a terrestrial network, like for a data center or whatever, or for like an enterprise. There are some similar considerations, but there's a lot of stuff you have to think about in the environment, like space, outer space, that just you don't have to care about on Earth, because it doesn't, you're not going to have like the extremes of hot and cold. You're not going to have insane radiation on Earth, ideally, like you would in space, right? So you have to think about that with your network when you're designing it. So, like I said, it's a whole other enchilada to like talk about are just communications to and on ground to the vehicle versus communications on the vehicle.
Wow. Yeah. I guess a lot of the control, everything will be networked, won't it? So all the controls and stuff, and sort of like telling it where to go and things. So yeah, that's the main question I had. So
I mean, like, think about a car, right? Because cars have networks on them too. And like certain variations of Ethernet actually live on a lot of our cars. And, these days cars are built with much more computer systems in them than they ever have before, right? So you obviously have to have a network on a car so that the car, or the, truck or whatever it is, operates as a whole unit that is that car, versus just like the individual computer systems on it. It's the same concept with a rocket, right? The network allows this thing to act as the thing and not just those individual parts. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then you answered it kind of, well, it's a sort of related question, but I was going to ask, do you have to be careful on what things you make videos on? So
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is very emphatic, right? Yes. I originally was not going to talk about it at all.
Yeah.
My mentor at work is like very cautious, and I understand that. So I've sort of adopted his sort of thoughts on it are like, maybe there's some things you actually can talk about more in depth than you expect, but it's better to just not, just in case you get it wrong. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of room for nuance, I think, especially with like ITAR can be very, very strict.
Yeah.
And then of course our individual company NDAs also, like I'd have to be so familiar with them that I know them like the back of my hand in order to like do everything perfectly right. So I err on the side of like, don't talk about the vehicle network. The closest I think I've ever gotten to that, I think, is like, man, what have I even talked about? I've alluded to, other than I've talked about like the general challenges of designing a network for space, but I haven't specified like how we address those challenges on our vehicle. I think I mentioned like very vaguely a project that I worked on to create like a custom device for lab troubleshooting that I did. And that's as far as I went with it, right? So I do have to be very, very careful. A lot of people like have thoughts on that. A lot of like external people who don't work for my company, they have a lot of like very strong opinions on like, I should be able to talk about this stuff in detail, but I understand where my company is coming from, right? It's like the NDA, you can debate about NDAs all day, but at the end of the day, like that's just what the company has chosen. And so I'm just going to go with it. And then ITAR is actually like a very, very strict like US thing where like, I won't go into like the whole history of it and everything, but essentially it's just like if you reveal in any way like how to build a rocket in general to someone from another country, the idea behind ITAR at least is that you're essentially teaching them how to build a bomb.
Yep.
Why would you? Because a rocket is kind of like a giant bomb.
Yeah.
With like its point is not to be a bomb, but it can turn into a bomb if you do it wrong. So like you don't really want to teach potentially bad actors from foreign countries or whatever how to build a bomb, how to make bombs better or whatever, right? So that's why I tend to err on the side of just don't mess with that, because it's a serious deal.
Yeah, I'd imagine the people that are sort of saying, "Oh, why can't you talk about it?" probably have no concept of an NDA
Yeah.
or anything. Like if you're not like if you know what I mean, like they're like a lot of people don't work at a company that have an NDA process. If you know what I mean,
Right.
and they just like think and then just generally think why can't you talk about it and that sort of thing. So I'd imagine that's probably why.
Right.
But,
And I'm very lucky that like my company does not appear to care that I like make videos. I think they would care if they found out I was talking about the Rocket Network like in detail. But they don't seem to care that I like have a personality. I actually, when I was hired on, the people who hired me already knew. They knew me from that, so it was fine.
That's cool, yeah.
Yeah, but it can be a bit of a challenge because I do really want to talk about it and I just can't.
Yeah.
Because it's I've learned so much, and I have alluded to some of the things that I've learned, over social media, but haven't gone into detail. And I really wish I could talk about it, but I won't.
Yeah. And then before you started working at Blue Origin, did you do anything online beforehand? How did that come about?
Yeah, so creating videos, I didn't. It didn't really I didn't create videos because I started working at Blue Origin. It actually came about because people were exiting Twitter, essentially. This was about a year ago. But I originally started back when I was working in the NOC, actually, on the night shift, just a little junior baby. And I was still learning a lot, and I was studying for my CCMP, and I was I got a Twitter account just to like connect with people in network engineering and tech. And I just started posting these stupid like image macros with like very garish like font and like a dumpster fire in the background. Just like I would make these silly like heavy on the cursing image macros about like technologies I was studying for the CCMP exam. And people seemed to think those were really funny. So I just like kept going for a little while. And so that's like how I started. I just was venting basically about studying for the NP, which I never got, by the way, but it was fodder for a lot of fun jokes, at least. Yeah. And then I started making videos about a year ago now because of this, like, what seemed at the time like a mass exodus from Twitter, which, more has been kind of an exodus, but some people have stayed, so I'm now active on like multiple different platforms. I did not originally think I was going to start making videos. This was the TikTok thing that I do that gets posted to like Instagram and Twitter when I'm done. Like that was begrudging. I did not want to do that at first. I was not jazzed about the idea of like making videos. I did not think I would be good at it.
Yep.
Which I wasn't for a while, and I'm still not that great, but I think I've improved. It was a bit of an adjustment for sure.
Yeah, I can the similar sort of thing for me as well. So it's making videos of any kind of form is a big learning curve, like speaking correctly and just trying to speak normally when you film yourself is just
Yeah, and you like start worrying about how you look, and like people will comment, especially if you're a woman, right? Like people will comment about how you look, whether it's good or bad or whatever, right? So you have to like deal with that. And then there's like you open yourself up. I think once you put your face like very publicly out there, you do open yourself up to a lot of whatever people's opinions are, whether those are good or bad or in between. Like they will say it, they will let you know, and you have to be ready for it.
I can't
I have
even...
to. Well, I know you make videos for this podcast, right? Like I know you record video, but do you make any other video content yourself?
Yeah, so my day job, I work for a company called Hostify, which does network software hosting for Ubiquiti hardware. So I make YouTube videos as part of my job for that, so like tutorials and things.
Okay.
And that was the first thing I did for video, and then I do other bits and pieces for the website behind this podcast, like car reviews and different things. So
okay.
But yeah, so I do tutorial videos about networking day to day.
So you know the struggle. You understand the struggle. Okay, cool. Yeah. At least like I'll say this, like getting on video, I feel like I was at least able to speak okay at first, even though my like audio video quality wasn't the best because I had been on podcasts. And I was like regularly speaking there. So, at least the skills from one medium sort of transfer over a bit. But, you know, at the beginning, it was like I had only been tweeting on Twitter. I had only been posting there. And like, that's so easy to do, right? Like I have COVID right now. And I've just been tweeting from my bed, like feeling like shit, right? Like it's so easy to post on Twitter.
Yep.
I didn't need to really do anything to prepare for that. And like to a degree, even though my face was out there on Twitter, it wasn't the same as like video. So, you know, it was hard for me to move to video, but now I'd say I'm fairly comfortable with it. So it's been fun.
And then I'm not sure how long, it's a bit of a tricky one, but I'm not sure how long it's been a problem for you. But I noticed recently you had quite a lot of like sexist comments and stuff online, and I can't even begin to imagine what that's like to deal with, to be honest. Like,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really hard at first. Now it's only like hard.
Yeah.
You know, like it does get easier, I think, especially because I'm lucky enough to be part of a community of people who, like, an overwhelming majority are just wonderful people, very supportive, men and women. But, you know, let's be real, the tech community is a majority of men. There's more men than women.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful all the time for the many, many, many supportive, awesome, you know, frankly, amazing men that I've met and am friends with and have been able to connect with through, you know, doing this kind of stuff, making content or just posting stupid shit on Twitter. Like it's been a lot of fun. So I got to say, like, the sexist comments are difficult for me at times to get over, but I do get over them. And it's because everybody else is so awesome. So having that community is like having a support system, and eventually I am always walked away from the ledge, so to speak.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it's useful having a good network of people, especially if you're a bit more public than you'd like to be, I guess. Like, I will say this only recently, like very recently, have I ever had issues with like where I felt like my personal safety was kind of at risk. Oh, really?
I hate saying that, but like it happens every once in a while, right? And I'm not going to say that I was this innocent little lamb just sitting here minding my own business. I piss men off. Like, I will piss men off every once in a while, and it's because they say stupid shit about women, right? So I'm very outspoken. I will tweet about this person. I will retweet what they said about women and be like, look at this joker, right? Look at this clown. And they don't like that when you call them out, especially when you say, hey, this person owns this company. So I have had just a couple situations where I thought that somebody was capable of like doxing me and like swatting me, right? And luckily that never actually happened. I've had a few very sad, pathetic attempts to dox me that were not accurate. So luckily, you know, that's not a challenge, by the way, listeners. That's not me saying, please don't dox me. But yeah, I've had some people try to do that, and it's just sort of like, you know, I was, again, the community. Like, I had a lawyer actually contact me and be like, hey, if you want, like, I'll give you a free hour of my time if you want like some help dealing with this. And he did so much to ease my mind, and now I feel like I'm much better equipped to deal with even something like that. Right.
That's really good.
So yeah,
I don't know I think networks like Twitter as well, it's so literally, I think I was listening to a podcast about how Twitter got started. I think it was Land of the Giants or something. They were talking about the history of the social media. When it got first started, it was quite a unique thing, because literally, if you post anything on a new account, that can go anywhere you want. It's got access to everyone on the network. Whereas something like Facebook or Instagram, you have to be following that person to see the stuff, and friends with them. So I think when people say stuff online, they're not don't think too much about it. Think, oh, this could actually be shared wherever you want, and someone with millions of followers can just retweet this whenever they want. It takes 2 seconds, and you've been pushed into that new network of people. So that's actually a topic that I find really interesting, that I think should be talked about more. I think what you're tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're talking about is sort of the like power dynamic between I don't know, people with a lot of followers on like a very public platform
like Twitter, for example, right, where everybody can see that what you said potentially versus like Facebook or whatever, where you may have to be like friends with that person to see what they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn about being a like very visible person in this space. I don't think this is unique to the tech space or anything, but being a very visible person on the internet has I've made some mistakes in that vein where I have like quote tweeted somebody and been like pretty harsh, and this person has like 50 followers and I have like 20,000 at the time or whatever, right? And it just, so then that person gets piled on too. And even if what they said was stupid, even if they were being a jackass, like, do they really deserve to be harassed to that level? Because ultimately, you know, it just, me having that many followers immediately increases like the scope of what that person said. And I have regretted times where I've like caused a pile on to a person like that. And so now I try to be as conscious as I can and as like purposeful as I can about whose posts I interact with and in what way, and like what is the power dynamic here, and how do I think my followers will probably respond. Again, I have purposely, like I have done it knowingly to men who say really awful things about women, for example, on the internet. I have very purposely quote tweeted and pointed out who they are, for like knowing that they would get this pile on. But I don't try to do that. I don't try to make that a regular thing. And it's only when it's like, this person's really fucked up. Like this person needs to fucking shut up now. Like they are abusing people online. They need to stop. But again, that's even saying that makes me feel a little ick. I'm like realizing, you know, it's like a vigilante type thing almost. It feels weird, and so I'm constantly going back to like, what kind of a person do I want to be at the end of the day? I have to reevaluate.
Yeah, I wasn't. I think. Yeah, the thing I was on about was I think you took it a different direction. Like should you? The thing I was on about was like the fact that that's possible. People don't consider it before they click post.
Oh,
that's what I mean.
I see.
The fact that it is got the potential to be so exposed, and you can have. I've seen it happen loads, and it's made me quite scared, to be honest. like of the potential that whole group of people has. It's like a, I don't know, like a ticking time bomb a little bit, but just go.
Are you talking about like people think they're behind this anonymous screen, and then they, yeah. That I get. Yeah, I guess you're talking about like the other side of it, right? The other side of the coin there, where, it's another thing that you have to grapple with being online. So that is a good point. Like when you're very visible already, or you have a lot of followers, you kind of expect that, but when you don't, you don't. And so, you know, how do you handle that? I don't have a whole lot of patience for people who don't think about that and say something awful.
That's fair enough.
At the same time,
yeah,
but you know, at the same time, you can argue like, am I the judge, jury, and executioner metaphorically of people's, I don't know, online lives? It's a really, really tricky, nuanced thing. So I try to be as conscious of all of this as I can be, but philosophically, it's a little overwhelming.
I got you. I think people who do get those sort of comments online, they do very well to handle it, even if behind the scenes you're not. And yeah, it's a shame that people have to deal with it day to day. It's just I have gotten to the point, like sort of along those lines, like dealing with it day to day, with things like sexist comments or rude comments or whatever. I think I mentioned like I was really, really bad at dealing with them at first, and I would just react all the time to every single one basically, and like call attention to it, quote tweet it, or take a screenshot and like say, look at this terrible person. And to some degree I still do that, right? Like it's very, depending on the severity of it, right? But it's very it can be unhealthy, not for like also for that person obviously, but it can also be unhealthy for me to like, you know, focus on it that much purposefully. And even though I'm definitely going to see it regardless,
I can choose to like give it more life than it deserves by like drawing a ton of attention to it and constantly going back to it, versus like, yeah, it's shitty. Yeah, I need to go like take my mind off of this for a little while because it affected me. But ultimately, like if I make a post on Twitter about this terrible thing someone has said, ultimately I'm going to have to read it over and over again, and it's going to keep getting into my psyche and all that. And so I've learned how to take care of myself a little bit better by not like going back to some comments.
Because otherwise you could either do one thing. You could either block the person that has said the thing, or you could choose to quote tweet it, whatever. And every time someone interacts with that, you'll see that come back every single time. So yeah.
And unfortunately, there are people who, even if you block them, they have accounts. They have sock accounts or whatever. They make multiple accounts to follow you and then continue to harass you. And that kind of thing I deal with on an individual basis, depending on the person and how much attention do I think they want. Will I make them happy by drawing attention to it? There's a few people out there that many of us in the I'm sure in like the InfoSec community and the tech community are very aware of, who like just, if you give them more attention, then they're happier in their own miserable little way. And so the best thing to do is just make sure they know that you don't really care. So I have been practicing not caring.
Let's move on to something a bit more positive.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry.
That's right. Mentioned at the start of the episode that you've been dabbling into Wi-Fi stuff. What I saw something, you posted a video where you got an Ekahau, which I've used one of them once. They are so cool.
I should have. I don't have it out right now, but yeah, I've got a sidekick too. That Ekahau was kind enough to like just, we collaborated on some videos, right? Like they wanted me to make some videos, and in the end, I was just like, can you just send me some cool shit, and then I'll do the videos, and they did, and it was the coolest shit. So I have the sidekick 2, which is their newest network analyzer, spectrum analyzer, like wireless network everything device that they have. And holy shit, like I don't know enough about Wi-Fi. I feel undeserving of this device, but I have such a blast using it because I've done some really videos that I had a blast making for Ekahau, because all I did was like go to places and like criticize their Wi-Fi like based on what the sidekick gave me. So I wasn't gonna obviously like dox myself by like doing my own home Wi-Fi. I did do that on my own, but I'm not gonna show it on camera. And so I went to like a Wendy's and I went to a mall, and I've done some stuff at a Costco, but I think I'm gonna have to redo it. So unfortunately that's not on video, but I've done a few different places now where I've like analyzed their Wi-Fi, like public places, and shared that online, and how the sidekick like does all the things it does. And I don't think I've even scratched the surface of what that thing does. So I've been meaning to like take more of the Ekahau training, but I just got so distracted with how fun it was to do those surveys. So I've got a few really like, I think they're really fun videos of me like doing the mall Wi-Fi and walking around the Wendy's and eating chicken nuggets. So
yeah, for those wondering, you can get doxed by Wi-Fi, not simply by the SSID of the Wi-Fi network. It's by essentially the MAC address of the SSID it's being broadcast. There is a database out there full of, they're called BSSIDs, and essentially the way your phone or device like a laptop knows where it is by that database. So you could essentially get doxed by cross-referencing that database essentially, so which is great.
I don't think I knew that. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
You can actually potentially be doxxed just with a MAC address?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I was not showing MAC addresses when I made these videos.
Like in the mall as well. So if you've got an SSID that's the same SSID being broadcast over different Wi-Fi access points, each Wi-Fi access point has a unique BSSID. And then again, that can be also in that database. So if you've got like a laptop with no GPS, it knows where it is based on that database. So.
Wow. So wait, you said BSSID, right?
Yeah.
This is a dumb question, right? So is that different than an SSID? Like, what does the B stand for?
So it's, I don't know what the B stands for, but...
Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot, but is it different? Like,
so the SSID is the Wi-Fi name, so like Wendy's Wi-Fi, and then the way that
Okay.
the phone knows the difference between the different access points that are broadcasting that unique SSID. It uses essentially a MAC address, which is called a BSSID, and then that's how it maps it. So it knows the difference between the two.
It is it's a special MAC address, or
Yes.
it's just a MAC address. We call it BSSID.
It's a software MAC address, I think.
Oh, you know what? That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
That's right.
So I was, what was I looking at? I think it was the Wendy's one. It was either the Wendy's one or like my home one. But I did notice, right? Like occasionally the Sidekick will, like, it does its best to know like this is an AP versus not.
Okay.
But like occasionally it will show an AP on the heat map that it's detected that's actually not an AP.
Right.
It just thought it was a separate AP and it's like right next to the main AP, the primary one. And it turns out, I talked to the Ekahau folks about this because I was curious. I was like, this is not an extra AP in my house. I'm curious. Like, I noticed that the MAC address on it is like 1 in hex, like off from the primary MAC address. And they explained like that's probably like I forget the antenna, I guess, on like separate antennas on the AP or something like that, right? Like it has separate MAC addresses for each little NIC or something. And so, I didn't make that connection. Like, I guess that might be the BSSID. Okay.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, if you've got an access point that's broadcasting 3 different SSIDs, each one of those will have a BSSID, which is, I think, it's essentially the MAC address. Like part of its identity is part of the MAC address plus some extra stuff, and then each BSSID will be ever so slightly different. It's just so the devices roaming around can work out which one's which, essentially.
That's fascinating. Wow, look at me. I do need to get back into Wi-Fi. I've been meaning to do more of those videos with the Sidekick. Part of me, I want to find the time to learn more, so when I actually do a video on it, I'm not just going like, hey, this is so cool. Like I could actually explain a little bit about it. But also I just like, I've been very busy. So I need to get back into it. But I truly have had a blast with the Sidekick. So thanks, Ekahau, if you're listening.
What kind of things have you found wrong with public Wi-Fi?
Actually, well, okay, I still need to go. I have not. The mall Wi-Fi was an overwhelming, like I'm sure, like people who know Wi-Fi, right? Like I'm sure you're aware, like the mall was insane. It was just a free-for-all, like Wild West, throw your AP here, make it, just pick a channel, who cares? Like just throw it here. And so there's tons of APs and tons of different like rogue devices probably, and then like personal hotspots and things like that. So it was just like this overwhelming map. I did not know it was quite the Wild West Wi-Fi wise in a mall.
Because you've probably got the mall Wi-Fi itself, and each store has probably their own Wi-Fi. And then you find in restaurants that the POS systems, whatever companies install them, doesn't understand VLANs. So you end up having 3 APs next to each other doing different things. So
yeah, that's hilarious to me. Like I would love to find that out just for fun and be like, haha, Skechers did some shit with their Wi-Fi. But also like seeing all the Wendy's one I found, I forget which model of car it was, but I don't know, it was like a Hyundai or something, or like it was a Subaru, I think. But they were like, it was like a little hotspot in each, you could see in the parking lot outside of the store.
Yeah.
That like there were a few cars parked there because you could see the you could see the SSIDs like lining up like in the parking lot. Hilarious. I did not know. I didn't realize, like it makes sense now, but I didn't realize doing that survey that I would pick things up like that. It's fascinating how much stuff is advertising all the time, like over wireless or like mobile, like it's fascinating. I love it.
And this is what I got back to the first. This is what I mentioned at the very start of the episode. Like Wi-Fi itself, publicly, has only been around for 23, 24 years. Like how entrenched in our life that it's become
and now it's in
so
cars.
Quickly. Like it's just incredible.
Yeah, it is wild. I remember when it first came out, actually. I feel very old. I'm like old enough to have been conscious and like paying attention and stuff, like when Wi-Fi was a thing. But yeah, I'm so... If I if I had infinite time and money, or like I could just snap my fingers and like pause time and like study a thing for as long as I needed, and then snap them again, and I'm an expert now. It would be wireless, solely because I find it so interesting.
Yeah.
Not because I'm not really that interested in going into like a Wi-Fi related career, or like track in my career. It's just so damn cool.
Yeah. If you want, there's one thing of it, learning about it, how it works, and then the other side of the coin is troubleshooting it, and then they're two different
Right,
side of.
Just like anything, right? Though, like we know as network engineers, like it's you study for your CCNA or your CCNP, and then you go and you do like all the things like wrong to troubleshoot, because that's just how the real world works, right? So hilarious. But, hey.
Yeah, fantastic. And then I don't know. I mentioned a company called Ubiquity in the show. I don't know what do you think about some of the new networking hardware that's coming out? So, like, personally, I'm really bad at using anything that's command line based. I just can't get my brain around it somehow. And
really,
yeah, and then when you speak to people, they're saying, "Oh, this isn't proper stuff because it has no command line, or it's GUI based, or whatever." But like
sticklers.
Yeah.
I love the command line, but I don't know. I got a CCNA and that's all I knew, and then I went to a knock and that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And GUIs upset me sometimes, but I'm not gonna sit here and be like, looking down on hardware that has GUIs.
Yep.
It makes it easier for people to use.
Yep.
I think it's wonderful, honestly. It makes things more accessible. Command line's always fun, in my opinion, but it's also not like something that I think we need to stay in forever as an industry. Like if you're doing, especially if you're making consumer networking, more or less consumer networking hardware, like why not make it easier to use? It makes sense from a business perspective. More people are going to buy your stuff and like want to use it, the easier it is to use, and a GUI is just easier to use. But like, when you're working an ISP or something, I don't know, and it's like you got to do some complicated BGP shit or whatever. Like sometimes I actually do think that, if you're doing something that has a high level of impact, it might be better maybe to be using a command line, because you have to enter those things in very purposefully.
Yep.
Whereas depending on the GUI or like the interface you're using, you could sort of, I don't know, I could see this in myself. I could see myself going on like autopilot a little bit and like just clicking stuff. Like what if you accidentally like click on the wrong thing and suddenly you've taken down the internet for like your East Coast customers or something, right? Like I feel like sometimes the command line can be nice because you have to actually type in every value, unless you've got automation, which blah blah whatever. But like if we're talking manual command line, if you have to like enter in that OSPF metric like by hand, it really really sets that for you. You know what you're entering in usually.
I kind of did that once. I was inside a MikroTik GUI once, and I accidentally disabled the interface for its uplink.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So how many people?
Oh, quite a few hundred.
Lost? So. Oh boy, that's always fun.
So
but you're not
fixed.
A real engineer until you do something like that. Preferably multiple times, but you have to do it at least once to be a real engineer. So
yeah, we had
congrats.
We had some fiber optic equipment that was command line only, and for how much of a struggle this was for me, everything that I had to do on that piece of hardware, I'd have it written out. Every single command, like how to do this certain thing, how to do that certain thing, because I can never ever remember it. I just must be something to do in my brain. I just can't remember command line stuff. So
well, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like a huge portion of CCNA, CCNP stuff is just rote memorization of command line like stuff, and you could make a very legitimate argument that like why are we spending our time on that when we could spend our time actually learning how it works? And that's a much more like a much more beneficial thing to do for us in the long run. Like memorizing commands, like it's not that interesting.
No.
So I understand the like fear that some engineers have of like getting rid of the command line, but I also think they need to chill out about it a little bit. Like I love the command line, like I said, but I'm not going to sit here and like say we should delay progress, make things less accessible for people forever. So
yeah. And then just finally, have you got some sort of skills that you've learned over the past few years of being a network engineer that you think would be good for people to sort of try and learn?
That's a good question. I I often feel like the skills I've learned other people already know, so it's hard for me to. This is probably an imposter syndrome thing.
But there's always people who are like learning how to be a network engineer for the first time.
That's
So,
true. That's true. That's a good point. Skills wise, I would say so two things. One of them a little more solid than the other one. Troubleshooting. That sounds very obvious, but I've met a number of network engineers who usually it's the more junior people, of course, but like not great at troubleshooting. Like being able to see the problem at a high level, and then like sort of organize their thoughts in whatever the way they need to, and drill down into, all right, first possibility, let's test this out, this is our plan, this is how I'll do it, this is what will indicate that it is this or this, and based on that I will do, branch off into your different options for troubleshooting. Being able to organize your thoughts in that way, it was a painful thing for me to learn at first because for whatever reason my brain just didn't want to learn that way. But after working in the NOC for a while at the ISP, I did have to learn that because my job was constant troubleshooting. And carrying that lesson and that skill over to aerospace. I don't work with other network engineers like in person on the stuff that I troubleshoot. I'm the only one.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it's scary. It was scary at first, right? If I'm out of an idea, I'm out of an idea. Nobody else has an idea really. So being able to sort of like bring that skill over was very helpful because people can tell me like, hey, my box can't talk with that box on the rocket, and that's a really, really bad thing, Lexie. But they won't be able to say like, I took a PCAP here, right? And like, this is what I saw. They don't know to say like, oh, well, I looked at the network on this portion and I saw that my message got up to this point, but then it was dropped by something, right? They don't know that process. And so I can come in, and even if it doesn't end up being a network issue, which it almost never is because my stuff works really well, I can still help with the troubleshooting process anyway, because it still involves the network, and that's a network engineer's like strongest skill, I think, is that step-by-step troubleshooting. The next thing that I would really highly recommend working on for everybody is taking a PCAP using TCP dump wherever you at certain points in the network, and then opening it up in Wireshark and understanding Wireshark. Wireshark is an amazing, amazing tool. I know that there are like vendor solutions that can do like a version of this for you. So if that's what you have, then cool. But I'm just going to call it like PCAPs and Wireshark for now, because that's what I'm familiar with. Being able to like not only use Wireshark, like learn how to use that software, but also be able to, dig a little bit deeper into what you expect. Like you studied OSPF in your CCNA or CCNP studies, right? Like, can you recognize the OSPF stuff that's happening right now? Can you recognize the routers talking to each other, whatever they're doing? Can you recognize like this is BGP, the IP address here? Does this make sense to you? Like being able to look at a PCAP, even though there's a lot of like command line stuff going away and like manual stuff going away, don't lose these kinds of skills in favor of automation. Automation is great, but make sure you're still able, in the event that you need to analyze network traffic and information. So.
Fantastic. And then finally, somewhat similar, have you got any advice for anyone looking to start getting into networking? I'll start with that one, if that's all right. And then my first one would be buy some old networking hardware, take it home, and set up a lab.
Yeah.
And just mess around with it for ages.
Play around.
That's how I built my knowledge of stuff. So that's my little bit of advice.
Yeah, definitely have a little bit of a home lab if you can. Now, I understand that can get expensive. Even like the old networking equipment, like depending on where you are in your career and your life and whatever, a couple $100 for like old ass switches, it can be a lot still. So if you can, having a physical lab is great, but you don't have to have that. So my like inverted namesake packet tracer is a great way to like get started without having to have physical equipment. I think you can download it for free if I remember correctly from Cisco. I don't remember. It's been a while since I used it, but yeah, I'm pretty sure you can download it for free. And a lot of people share like labs specifically built for Packet Tracer online that they'll just share with you. It's a great community, so you can like practice your networking skills using those labs that they create. Also, like honestly, I get people asking me how to get into networking or tech or whatever a lot. And I don't want to like simplify it too much that it's stupid, but also like just get your CCNA. Like that is my biggest piece of advice for anybody. Just get your CCNA. Whatever, you know, and I know that's a vendor specific cert, but it is the one that I'm aware of that not only teaches you vendor specific stuff, but it also focuses very heavily on the basics of networking in like a non-vendor specific way too. And so I would say that honestly, my biggest piece of advice, just go for your CCNA, because the things that you learn going for that and then passing that exam will carry over into everything else in networking, and it's invaluable. So
yeah, also like even if you can't buy any sort of networking hardware, just sort of deconstruct your home network a little bit and try and figure out how that all works together, and maybe if you can put some VLANs in place. I do appreciate that most hardware doesn't support VLANs. Most consumer stuff doesn't anyway, but
I have a rant I could go on, which I won't right now. But like, I agree with you, right? First of all, I agree with you, so I'm not trying to take away from that, but I will say it has been annoying as shit to have to like demystify VLANs for people who only know them based on consumer hardware, because there is actually a lot of like consumer hardware, networking hardware now that does allow you to enforce VLANs, but like in like a limited way. Like it's not exactly like the VLANs you would put in on the command line or whatever. They have like different options, and it's all sort of like, yeah, and it's like behind like a GUI, right? So it's not clear. Like people just assume like I know what a VLAN is and does, and how it works and where you can use it and where you can't, just because like I don't know, no offense Ubiquity, but like because Ubiquity like gave me these options or whatever, right? And that's not usually the case. Like it's not the kind of VLAN you'd enact on like a Cisco machine, right? So I'm not trying to be elitist about it, but like I get annoyed. I know a lot of engineers who they're not network engineers, and they just think they know what VLANs are and that they can tell me what I can do with VLANs based on their knowledge of their home network and the GUI that they've used like 3 times. So that's my rant in small form.
I think that's a good place to end. Thank you so much.
Yeah, on my like hating on consumer networking hardware. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Where can people find you online if they want to find out more about what you make and do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You can find me as Track It Pacer on pretty much any social platform that matters at all. So like Instagram, Twitter, I'm really big on there, and TikTok as well, but I post my TikTok stuff to Instagram. I'm also on like the Twitter alternatives, so like Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads, all that good stuff. So I also have a website, and it is trackitpacer.com. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, I have some like CCNA and a little bit of CCNP resources on there that I periodically add to in sort of blog form, and they're just like other people's resources that helped me out. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff and getting started, I hope that can help you.
Nice one. So. Yeah, all of your social media links and website links will be in the show notes. And then thanks everyone for watching or listening to this episode of Creator Spotlight. You can find out more about the interface at theinterface.uk. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you again next time.